In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this cloth material test object using a very simple cloth simulation. So I'm just in a new file here. This is not our test material file. This is just a clean scene, but because I've updated my startup file, I have all these additional objects in the scene. I'm just going to select everything and get rid of them. I just want a completely empty scene at the moment. We have a collection in here as well. I'm going to call this cloth test object. And this is where I'm going to store this new object. So I'm just going to add a new object to the scene. So Shift A, Mesh, Ecosphere. Now this is going to be a little bit big. I want something around about the size of a basketball or so. So I'm going to take this radius down to about 0.25. So it's a little bit more realistic. I'm not really concerned about how rough this is. In fact, having some of these points might make the material test object a little bit more interesting. I'm going to use Shift A, add another mesh. This time I'm going to add a plane. The plane might be a little bit too big. Let's go to edit mode and scale that down just a little bit. Back to object mode. And we're going to move that above our object. I'm also going to rotate it a little bit on Z. Not too much, just a little bit. Just to give it a more interesting simulation. So the idea is our ecosphere is going to be a collision object. This is a physics object in Blender that other objects can bounce off of. Our plane is going to be our cloth. But in order for that to work, we need a lot more subdivisions on this. There are many different ways we could do this. I'm going to go to edit mode, edge, and subdivide. And I'm going to take my number of cuts and I'm just going to type in 40. So we have quite a few subdivisions there. Hopefully that's going to be enough to get a good simulation. Now with our properties panel on the right hand side, we have this icon here, which is our physics properties. Let's select our ecosphere first of all and click collision. Now for the moment, I'm not going to make any changes in there. Hopefully that'll be fine with the default settings. And next I'll select my cloth object and select cloth in the physics tab. And again, I'm not going to change any settings here because I want to show you what happens with the default values. So let's just check on our timeline that we're at frame 0. And let's click play. So I get quite a nice result there straight off. Now, depending on how fast your system is, how many subdivisions you have on your mesh and your quality settings in cloth and speed multipliers, etc., anything that you have in collision quality, this may take a longer time to run. If you're really struggling, this object will be available to download. So you don't have to actually worry about doing this cloth simulation. You can just download this object, or you could decrease those quality settings, decrease the amount of topology on your cloth material, and you might be able to get it running. It might not just look quite as nice as hopefully ours will look, but at least you'll get some experience doing some cloth simulation. So one issue that we have with this simulation at the moment is we're getting some intersections in the geometry. You can see here, we're getting a lot of jagging here, which can be smoothed out, but we're getting some intersections. So let's go back to frame 0. Let's turn on self-collision. Let's play again. Now you can see it takes a lot longer to run through the timeline this time. The last time it was almost a real-time simulation, but this time it's taken a lot longer to go through these frames because it has to calculate every time one of these faces or edges or verts hits against another face, edge or vert on the object. Okay, so we have quite a few possible nice frames there. Now it starts to fall off just before 200. I'm just going to go to the front view and we need to make sure this looks a little bit nicer. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to click Shade Smooth, and straight away that's actually fixing quite a few of the issues. We'll go to the modifier tab and go to subdivision surface and add one of those in. And again, you can see this is fixing quite a few issues. I think I can get away with doing one more level in the viewport. And that looks good. Let's add another modifier. This is going to be a solidify modifier. This is going to add some thickness to our material. Okay, and I think that actually looks pretty good. Now, with this object in the scene, if we were to change the frame, we would lose this simulation. So what I want to do before I do anything else is I want to apply this cloth modifier since I'm happy with it. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on this little drop down arrow and apply as shape key. Now don't worry, you're going to see something a little bit strange happen here. When we click on that, it disappears and you may think you've lost your simulation because if we move on the timeline, nothing happens. In actual fact, we have a shape key for this object saved. So I'm going to go down to Object Data Properties with the cloth selected, and we have two shape keys here. We have Basis, which is what we have just now, and we have Cloth. So if I click on Cloth and increase the value all the way to 1, we get that shape key that we've created using the cloth. Now if I take that value back, you can see that this is not a replay of the simulation. Essentially, we have all our verts stored at this location, and then we have all our verts stored at this location, and this is just a smooth blend between them, a linear blend. So if we followed any individual vert, it would just move in an exact straight line from one point to another. So this is not a replay of the simulation. There are ways you can bake that simulation in, but for our purposes, we don't have to worry about that at all. So let's go to our front view. I'm going to rotate this object on the Z-axis just to see if there's a better angle. Something that I'm a little bit more happy with. And yeah, do you know, I think pretty much any angle here would actually work okay. So I'm going to stick with what I've got here for the moment. Now the ecosphere in the middle, we can just get rid of that. We can just click and delete on that. This is all we really want to keep. Okay, and now it's challenge time. So your challenge in this video is to create your own cloth test object. Now, even though I used an ecosphere and a plane, you could try out different shapes for the collision object. I would recommend maybe trying something like a simple set of stairs or a simple set of cubes or cylinders. Experiment with different cloth settings. Make sure you don't go too high with the quality settings, otherwise it will really slow down your computer, and try and keep an eye on your subdivisions on your plane as well. Remember, if it's really going too slow, you can always reduce the number of segments on your plane, or you can decrease your quality settings slightly. And don't forget to use self-collision so you don't get any intersections. So pause the video, have a go at that, and join me in a moment and I'll show you some of the other objects that I came up with. Welcome back. So I hope you had fun working with your cloth simulations, and I hope you came up with something interesting, or if you came up with something similar to that, that's okay as well. Remember, if you didn't get anything, the cloth test objects are going to be available to download. So before I do anything else, I just want to show you that I've saved this file, and I've actually saved it in the same folder as my asset browser. I've put it in a folder called Objects, not Materials where we have our course materials, but in an object folder, and I've marked this asset so that we can drag it into other scenes. So I'm just going to open up my course materials.blend file and show you the results of my cloth simulations. So with this one, it was pretty simple. I just created some stairs, created some cloth, and had it fall down the stairs, and it's created these nice patterns. Now for some reason when I did this simulation, it went a little bit crazy and very slow when I did self-collision. We do have some intersections across the material, but I think when you look at it at certain angles, you don't notice the intersections quite as much. So I think I can get away with this as a test object. The much more successful test object that I created was this cloth test object here. And I'll just move this out of the way a little bit. So this is very similar to the one I created before. Quite like some of the nice little curves on this, some of the nice little folds. So we can use this one or we can use the other one, That's absolutely fine. Now in order to add that other test object into this scene, I'm just going to open up an asset browser over here, and we should have our cloth test object already in here. Let's go to all, and we haven't added it to our asset library yet, so let's do that now. Let's go to Edit, Preferences, and in our file paths we want to add a new library, so we're going to hit plus. We'll find our folder, so we've got our asset browser and we have this object folder now that I've created. Add asset library objects. And now if we look through here, we should be able to find that other test object. Let's go from all to objects, and there's our cloth test object. Let's click and drag this into this scene. And where did we land it? Okay, so we landed it sideways because of the wall there. Let's click and drag it here. And that's a little bit nicer. Let's go into our front view and just move that up into place. So you can see it looks very similar to the other one. It is at a different scale as well. So now we have a few different options for when we do our test renders. And I'll just try and put these all in around about the same place, right in the middle of the camera view. I might even scale this one up slightly. There we go, and we'll just hide. So in the next video we're going to be able to move on and start creating some very simple cloth materials. I'll see you then.